I heard my landlord murder a man, and then he knocked on my bedroom door. I froze on the stairs as I heard a body hit the floor below me. I bolted to my room, but then came 3 perfectly spaced knocks. I opened the door to the most dangerous man in Boston, with another man's blood still stuck under his fingernails. He didn't threaten me. Instead, he wiped the blood away, kissed me, and promised that anyone who ever tried to hurt me would die screaming.
Picture this. It has been pouring freezing rain for 3 straight days, turning Warren into a total nightmare of gray slush. Our girl Elena stands outside, an insanely fancy Beacon Hill brownstone. Her cheap boots completely soaked through, gripping a phone with a shattered screen. She keeps double-checking the address because this place is a literal mansion. Red brick, flawless white trim, the works. This is her absolute final lifeline before that brutal eviction notice becomes reality. Look, you and I both know that exhaustion makes us do crazy things. At 2 in the morning, completely burned out, she blindly replied to a rental listing that was way too good to be true. And the crazy part? The owner replied instantly. It just goes to show, desperation is the ultimate blindfold when you are backed into a corner. The message literally said, "Come tomorrow at 3 p.m. and come entirely alone." That massive red flag should have sent her running for the hills. But when you are 26 and grinding double shifts at a depressing diner that smells like burnt coffee, your survival instincts just shut down. Sometimes, the fear of tomorrow makes us completely ignore the flashing warning signs right in front of us. She drags herself up those spotless steps, totally freaked out by how unnaturally clean the place is. Her hand is visibly shaking as she reaches for the buzzer, but before she even touches the button, the heavy door swings wide open. She was totally expecting some tired, old landlord in a cheap suit, just looking to grab her cash and go. Not even close, guys. The real boss was waiting. Instead of a dusty old landlord, Elena is suddenly face to face with a guy barely in his 30s, radiating pure mob boss energy. He is decked out in dark clothes, rocking a sweater that definitely costs more than she makes in an entire year. His shoes are so polished they literally reflect the gloomy sky. But his face is the real shocker. We are talking a razor-sharp jawline and pitch-black eyes that size her up in one terrifying, calculating sweep. He has that effortless, lethal kind of good looks that constantly tricks smart on the worst mistakes of their lives. Honestly, never let an attractive face distract you from the real danger hiding underneath. He stares right at her and snaps, "You are late." His voice is deep, dangerous, and dripping with a thick, heavy accent. Elena completely panics, frantically checking her cracked phone screen. It says 3:02 p.m. She stammers that she isn't late, that 2 minutes is nothing. He cuts her off ice cold, stating that in his world, 2 minutes means you are already dead. Boom. Talk about a crazy reality check. He steps aside and orders her inside. Right here is where every survival instinct screams at her to run for her life. But the freezing rain is chilling her bones, and that warm foyer looks way too good. It is a hard truth that our desperate need for comfort can completely overpower our gut intuition. She steps inside, and the massive door slams shut behind her like a bank vault. Instantly, she smells expensive cedar, thick smoke, and a metallic hint of pure, unfiltered danger. He barks out, "Third floor," and breezes past her toward a massive staircase. The guy doesn't even bother looking back. Men like him just expect absolute obedience, the exact same way they expect the sun to rise. Because she feels completely out of options, she follows him. It shows how being broke makes you hand over your own power without a fight. Her wet boots make a huge racket on the cold marble, while his shoes make absolutely zero sound. As they climb, the creepy reality of this mansion really sets in. There are hidden cameras tucked into every dark corner, and the walls are built super thick, literally designed to trap a scream inside. Passing the second floor, she spots a massive, heavily armed guard just watching them from the shadows. The danger level is spiking. Every single nerve in Elena's body screams that she just walked into a massive trap. The boss totally senses her panic. He casually explains the apartment belonged to his mother who recently passed away, and he just needs someone living there. Here is the wild part. His voice is completely flat. No emotion, no tears, just stating facts. But honestly, the deepest grief usually hides behind the absolute coldest masks people can wear. They hit the third-floor landing, and he uses a vintage brass key to unlock a solid wooden door. Lai glides open without a single creak. He tells her to look around. Elena has to squeeze right past him to get inside the room. In that split second, she is intensely aware of his imposing size and the terrifyingly dangerous lack of space between them. You and I need to really picture this setup. The room's air is thick, smelling like winter frost and top-shelf whiskey. Elena stands there, paralyzed by this guy's intense aura, even more than the literal hitman downstairs. The apartment is flawless, way too perfect. We are talking gleaming hardwood floors, heavy blackout drapes, and shelves packed with rare Italian books. Her voice shakes as she stammers that she doesn't understand. The rent is only $800, but this place is a luxury penthouse. He leans coolly against the doorframe, staring her down, and mutters that he knows exactly what it is worth. Listen, never forget this simple lesson. The most dangerous traps in this world always disguise themselves as a beautifully lucky break. His deep voice rumbles, asking if it suits her. Elena spins around, taking in the crisp white sheets, the fancy tub, and windows that actually block the brutal cold. No mold at all. This is the exact sanctuary she has been praying for while serving coffee to ungrateful ghosts on her soul-crushing night shifts. She drops her guard and whispers that it is perfect. Boom. He tells her it is hers. The tension in the room spikes to 100. Suspicious, she asks about background checks, pay stubs, and references from her awful previous landlord. He smoothly cuts her off, stating he doesn't care about any of that normal stuff. It is truly terrifying how pure desperation will completely blind a person to the deadly invisible strings attached to a sudden miracle. Ach tua pescan fight. He pushes off the doorframe, moving toward her like a dead-silent apex predator. He lays down his twisted rules. He only cares that she pays on time, respects the apartment, and never asks questions she doesn't want answers to. He stops exactly 3 feet away. He is close enough that she sees the cold gold flecks in his black eyes, and a wicked scar slicing his eyebrow. He smoothly asks, "Can you do that, Elena?" Instant ice water in her veins. She freezes, pointing out she never told him her name. He flashes a slow smile that completely misses his eyes, claiming she put it on the application. She absolutely didn't. That chilling realization hits her like a truck. It is impossible to hide from a dangerous stranger who has already dug up your deepest secrets before you even walked into the room. She demands to know who he is. His response is pure mob boss. He coldly states he is just a guy who owns the building, needs a tenant, and absolutely hates repeating himself. He reaches into his coat pocket, and Elena practically jumps out of her skin. Her mind flashes to those tragic news stories about girls who view sketchy apartments and just vanish. Instead of a weapon, he pulls out a folded lease. He tells her to sign it and move in, or go back to her miserable hole. His voice is so flat, it is actually terrifying. He gives her exactly 30 seconds to decide. Her hands visibly shake as she takes the paper. This right here is a brutal test of human nature. Every single instinct tells her to bolt out the door, but the sweet promise of financial salvation keeps her completely frozen in place. The contract looks totally normal at first. But then her eyes catch a tiny clause at the bottom. It demands absolute discretion about the building, the owner, and any suspicious activities observed inside. Heart pounding, she asks, "What kind of activities?" He just stares and says, 20 seconds. She tries to argue, but he cuts her down to 15. He checks his expensive watch and starts counting 10, 9, 8. Stick with me here, because this is where the panic truly sets in. Elena, the pictures, that brutal eviction notice, and the debt collectors hounding her over medical bills. It is a tough pill to swallow. But sometimes our hardest life choices aren't between good and bad. Usually, we are just forced to pick the lesser of two absolute nightmares. This luxurious apartment is practically glowing with safety, the guy keeps droning on. 5, 4. Elena Slana snatches his pen and aggressively scribbles her name. Her handwriting is a jagged mess of pure panic. The boss takes the paper back, inspects the fresh ink, and gives a single satisfied nod. "Welcome home, Elena." He tells her she can move in tonight, and his guys will bring her boxes up. He turns to leave but pauses at the door, letting a heavy silence fill the room. He drops the ultimate warning. If you see something, forget it. You hear something. It never happened. Ask 0 questions. Remember this, true peace in this chaotic world always comes with a massive price tag. Sometimes that price is simply turning a blind eye to the terrifying shadows operating next door. We are at the climax of the setup. Elena stands in that immaculate living room, completely paralyzed. Alessandro locks his black eyes onto hers, pinning her in place like a helpless bug. He whispers that if she breaks the rules, the lease is void. Too terrified to speak, she frantically nods. He calls her a good girl. Honestly, that gentle tone held way more threat than if he had screamed in her face. He promises to send the keys up in an hour, orders her to stay put, and vanishes. Left completely alone, she listens to his boots fade down the stairs, her heart hammering in her chest. Outside, the freezing rain keeps pouring, totally oblivious to her mistake. It proves a hard truth. The absolute most dangerous, inescapable prisons are always built with the softest, most luxurious walls. Picture this, guys. Elena is literally staring out the window at normal people living boring, drama-free lives. None of them are signing sketchy leases with phantom landlords who somehow know their deepest secrets. Her legs are turning to jelly as she collapses onto this insanely soft mattress, which is a massive upgrade from her usual smoky futon. But hold up, a crazy detail catches her eye. Right on the nightstand is a faded photo of a woman with kind eyes, holding a little boy who is maybe 5 years old. They look so happy posing in front of this exact same building. It just goes to show we should never judge a situation by its shiny surface. Sometimes the prettiest, most luxurious places are actually hiding the heaviest and darkest ghosts in their corners. Elena grabs the frame, her fingers literally shaking. The little boy in the picture has the exact same piercing eyes as the Mafia boss who just claimed her entire existence. You can totally see his dangerous villain features already forming. Then, huge plot twist. She finds expensive cardstock tucked behind the photo. It says, Alessandro Vitale, Private Acquisitions. No phone number or address, just terrifying blankness. She flips it over and reads black ink scrawled across the back, ordering him to always collect what is owed. She almost drops it before shoving it back into hiding. Honestly, this teaches us a really important lesson. Sometimes people bury their darkest, most terrifying secrets not to be malicious, but purely to ensure our survival in an unpredictable world. Every instinct in her body is screaming red flag. But the lease is signed, and the cold streets are not an option. She just hauled her sad little life into a luxury cage owned by a guy whose name literally screams danger. An hour later, boom, an envelope slides under her door with 3 brass keys and zero explanation. Classic mob boss behavior. By midnight, she is unpacking her trauma, and by 2 in the morning, she is stress cleaning a kitchen that is already spotless. By 4 a.m., she is curled up on the plush sofa, just staring blankly at the locked door. It is a harsh but very true reminder for all of us. Desperation is an incredibly powerful current, and if we let it take control, it will easily sweep us straight into the darkest and most dangerous waters imaginable. The sun is creeping over Boston, and Elena is watching dawn break through these insane velvet curtains. She is running on zero sleep, but buzzing with pure nervous energy. Her diner shift starts at 7, so she has to slap on a brave face. She hops into this fancy clawfoot tub, and the water is instantly scalding hot. She stands under that heavy stream, literally trying to scrub away the terrifying feeling of Alessandro staring directly into her soul. She can still hear his dark, whispering voice in her head. Finally, she throws on her tragic little work uniform with the squeaky sneakers. It is actually wild to think about. We constantly use our boring, everyday routines as a heavy suit of armor, relying on simple daily habits to completely hide our deepest fears from the world. Elena stares into the mirror, feeling like a total fraud. Fancy crown molding and polished floors are definitely not meant for someone carrying her heavy trauma. The walk to the diner gives her 20 minutes to completely gaslight herself. She convinces herself Boston is packed with rich dudes who buy buildings and forget them. She decides the old photo explains the cheap rent, thinking he is just a sad, grieving guy. Bro, she almost believes it. Soon she rolls up to the diner, smelling like greasy fries and sadness. This place has been her safe zone since she dropped out to care for her sick mom. But we all know the cold truth. It is honestly crazy how far a desperate human mind will stretch the facts just to rationalize a dangerous situation. Here is the tragic backstory. Her mom battled a brutal illness for 2 years, and the hospital bills totally outlived her. Debt collectors are ruthless. They do not care about fresh graves. Elena pushes through the diner doors and runs into Rita, a veteran waitress with fading red hair. Rita takes one look and bluntly says she looks awful. Elena just nods, totally zoning out while tying her apron. Rita is literally the only person who knows about the whole eviction drama, since she caught Elena crying in the walk-in cooler weeks ago. Hearing Elena finally found a place, Rita gives her this big, warm squeeze on the shoulder. It just goes to show, sometimes the simplest touch of genuine human kindness is exactly what it takes to completely shatter a heavily guarded heart. Rita points to a guy at table 4 who has been waiting 20 minutes. Elena grabs the coffee pot and slaps on her fake customer service smile. But boom! That mask completely shatters. Sitting there is not Alessandro, but a young guy who has the exact same terrifying predatory energy as the boss. Bro is flexing a tailored suit that costs more than Elena makes in 6 months. His cold eyes track her every move like a hawk. She tries to play it cool, offering coffee, but the guy just smoothly drops her full name. He literally starts reciting her age and her dead mom, checking off her trauma like a grocery list. It is a brutal life lesson. The past has a really cruel way of tracking us down and exposing our deeply buried secrets, no matter how desperately we try to hide. This guy casually lists out how totally isolated she is. No siblings, 0 romantic ties. Every word feels like a knife to the chest. He drops her exact new address, and the coffee pot almost slips out of her shaking hands. She panics and demands to know who he is. He softly says demands to know him as Luca, and he works for Alala. Sandro. Huge red flag. He orders her to sit. When Elena uses her shift as an excuse, Luca flashes an incredibly terrifying smile. Major plot twist. He literally bought the entire diner 30 minutes ago. Her greedy boss is in the back counting stacks of cash, and everyone else is gone. True power is the absolute ultimate silencer, my friends. It never bothers to argue with you when it can simply pull out a checkbook and buy the entire room. Elena frantically looks around, and the diner is a ghost town. Even Rita has vanished. Through the window, she sees her boss clutching a massive envelope of cash, like he just won the dark lottery. Her legs turn to jelly, and she collapses into the booth across from Luca. The hitman purrs his approval, praising her like she passed a twisted test. He tells her Alessandro wants to make sure she fully understands her situation. Elena hides her shaking hands, while Luca calmly explains she is now under the boss's absolute protection, which requires massive life adjustments. He slides a heavily encrypted cell phone across the table. It is a terrifying reality check for us all. Sometimes the most inescapable cages in life do not look like scary prisons. They are simply locked with solid gold. Luca speaks in an incredibly chilling tone. He casually drops that her old phone number is already transferred. There is only one contact saved, call it saved, and she has to call it for anything. Elena stares at the phone like a rattlesnake just uncoiled on the table. She tries to refuse, but Luca completely cuts her off. This was never a request. He keeps his voice casual, which makes the hidden threat so much more paralyzing. Alessandro protects his property, and she belongs to him now. When she argues she just pays rent, Luca leans in, exposing a dark shoulder holster under his suit. He reveals she is living in the exact room where the boss's mother passed away. It is a massive red flag and a powerful life lesson. Predators never believe in coincidences, and we should always question situations that seem perfectly engineered. Luca asks if she understands how rare that is, wondering how many people would literally kill for that kind of attention. The terrifying implication hangs heavily in the greasy diner air. Then he drops the insane rules. No unapproved visitors, no talking about the apartment, and she must keep up her routine while staying hyper-vigilant. Luca nudges the phone across the table, demanding she take it. Elena grabs it with numb fingers, and the screen lights up with two initials. A V. Luca makes it crystal clear that Alessandro is always watching. He is lurking in the shadows, supposedly keeping her safe, but really enforcing her total isolation. It hits her hard, delivering a truth we all need to recognize. It is absolutely terrifying how quickly a protective guardian angel can morph into a suffocating warden. Elena whispers that this is not protection at all. Boom! A deep baritone voice from right behind her corrects her, saying that it is love. It is Alessandro. She spins around, her heart pounding. He is standing by the entrance, and she did not even hear the door chime. Dressed in a sharp charcoal suit, the guy looks like pure sin walking the earth. He is the ultimate red flag. Alessandro commands Luca to leave them. The hitman stands instantly, fixing his jacket like a loyal soldier. Walking past Elena, he warns her to never make the boss repeat himself. He vanishes, leaving Elena trapped with the devil himself. Stick with me on this, guys. Sometimes the harsh behaviors we perceive as terrifying control are actually just a broken person's deeply twisted version of love. All right, guys, check out this insane setup. Alessandro slides right into the empty seat. Under those harsh diner lights, Elena finally sees the dude behind the Mafia rumors. Bro has a gnarly scar on his neck and eyes heavy from years of no sleep. His hands tell the real story, though. They are elegant but completely shattered knuckles. He knows exactly over shattered knuckles. He knows exactly how bones feel when they snap. He murmurs that she is afraid of him. She just sits there, frozen. He pours his black coffee with this slow, deliberate grace, telling her that fear keeps her careful, and careful keeps her alive. Listen, The craziest life lesson here is that sometimes the exact monsters we desperately try to escape are the ones who end up teaching us how to survive. Picture Elena shivering in this hot diner. She asks what he actually wants, sounding way braver than her panicked heartbeat. Alessandro just stares over his coffee and casually admits he is still figuring that out. When she calls him out, Bro drops a massive plot twist, demanding to know how her mother died. Talk about giving a girl whiplash. She chokes out that it was cancer, stage 4. Elena had to play nurse for 18 brutal months because her dad was gone before she was even born. Someone had to step up, right? You and I both know how that kind of isolating grief works. The harsh life lesson is that deep trauma never truly fades away. We just eventually learn how to carry the heavy weight on our shoulders while the rest of the world keeps spinning. Elena is thrown and asks why this matters. Alessandro drops the craziest reveal. His mom died in that exact apartment. Literally in the same bed Elena just slept in, and also from cancer. She is shook and says he should have warned her. He flips it, asking if knowing would have stopped her from taking the place. Remembering her eviction notice, she admits it would not have changed a thing. He stands up, drops a stack of $100 bills on the table, and orders her home. He even knows she has zero food and says groceries are coming. She freaks out about how he knows her fridge is empty. But then it clicks. The wildlife lesson here is that our deepest vulnerabilities are always totally exposed to anyone who knows exactly where to look. This mafia boss literally knows what she eats and how much she sleeps. Every single detail of her life is on his radar. He drops her name, sounding super smooth, but also like a strict command. He tells her straight up that dangerous dudes will start noticing her now. Before, she was invisible, just another struggling girl. But now, she lives in his territory and has his personal number. That makes her a massive target. He leans in insanely close, smelling like expensive cedar and smoke. Elena is secretly panicking because she is actually catching feelings instead of running. It is completely wild, but here is the life lesson. Sometimes the exact toxic danger we are told to run away from is exactly the thing our lonely souls secretly crave the most. He looks her in the eye, saying, if any guy even breathes her way, he needs to know. Not because he is a control freak, but to keep her breathing. She is totally lost, but his smile is dangerously sharp. Bro adjusts his cuffs like an absolute menace and gives his orders. Go home, lock up, and only open the door for a delivery guy named Marcus, who knocks 3 times. When he says he will see her soon, Elena actually asks when. Even she is shocked it slipped out. Alessandro pauses, looking amused, and asks if she is missing him already. Her face instantly turns bright red. Here is a terrifying life lesson for you. It becomes incredibly dangerous. The second we realize, we are actually finding comfort hiding in the shadow of a literal predator. Elena tries to backpedal, stammering about lease agreements. Alessandro throws on his leather gloves and shuts that down, saying the lease means whatever he wants it to. He agrees to use the 3-knock signal. Then he drops an absolute bombshell before walking out. He tells her to fix the photograph on her nightstand because he noticed she moved it. Elena is horrified, her blood running totally cold. How does he know about her bedroom? He casually admits the entire building is wired with hidden cameras. He claims it is just to protect her, not control her, telling her to learn the difference. Listen, the brutal life lesson here is that people will happily trade away their freedom for a little safety, totally blinding themselves to the beautiful cage locking them in. And just like that, the mob boss ghosts her, leaving Elena alone with a stack of cash and a burner phone that feels radioactive. For 3 weeks, her life is a fever dream. She still works at the diner, and But her boss stops giving her the worst shifts because Alessandro paid him off. Her coworker Rita asks worried questions, and Elena flat out lies, pretending her new landlord is totally normal. Complete cap. Alessandro is haunting her life without even being in the room. Groceries show up on time, with Marcus knocking 3 times and dipping out before she can blink. You guys have to understand this major life lesson. Keeping massive dark secrets will eventually become the heaviest anchor dragging you straight down to the bottom. That creepy burner phone stays quiet mostly, but around midnight it randomly lights up. He sends cryptic texts like "lock your windows for a storm," or "avoid the red train line." And bro, the craziest part? That exact accident hits the news 2 days later. Elena is staring at a text predicting the future, and her brain is melting. This guy does not just know things, he runs the city. She only physically sees him 4 times in 3 weeks. Once getting into a blacked-out SUV, and another time chilling in the back of her diner. He never even orders food. He just sits there staring at her without blinking like a total apex predator. The life lesson here is simple but terrifying. True, absolute power never actually has to shout to be completely and utterly deafening. She catches him a 3rd time in her hallway. She is dragging herself home late, and he is walking out of apartment 2B, the unit with the armed guard. They lock eyes for a second. He gives a tiny nod and ghosts down the stairs. But guys, that 4th time changes the entire game. It is a freezing Tuesday. Elena just finished a brutal double shift. Her feet are wrecked. Her back is screaming in pain. And she is praying for sleep. She is trudging up to her apartment, clutching her keys like a weapon. Too exhausted to even microwave her leftovers, listen closely, because here is a brutal life lesson. The universe always waits to completely ambush us right when our physical and mental defenses are entirely stripped away. Right as she hits the landing, absolute chaos erupts from the 2nd floor. She hears furious voices screaming in rapid Italian. Elena should have minded her business and remembered his rule about looking away. But Alessandro's voice cuts right through the yelling. He's snapping, telling this guy Franco that stealing from the family has only one payment. His accent is dripping with unchecked rage. The other dude starts begging for his life, totally terrified. Then, there is a sickening wet thud of a heavy body dropping to the floor. Complete dead silence follows. Elena's frozen in the dark stairwell, her heart pounding so hard her chest might crack open. The life lesson here is that giving into curiosity is a fatal flaw when you live surrounded by literal wolves. Elena is shaking so badly her keys make a tiny clinking sound. But in that dead silence, it sounds as loud as a cannon. Alessandro's voice floats, and absolutely terrifying, sounding super calm and absolutely terrifying, telling his guy they have a witness. Heavy boots immediately rush toward the stairs. Elena completely bolts her door miles away. Her hands sweat, she fumbles her keys, and jams them into the lock right as footsteps hit the stairs. She crashes inside, slams the door, and locks the deadbolt. But let us be real, a flimsy lock is not stopping a mafia boss. She backs up into her kitchen, gasping for air, staring at that silent burner phone. You and I both know that when true panic hits, it strips away every ounce of logic and leaves you running on pure, desperate instinct. She thinks about dialing the cops. But wait, she signed that shady lease and just heard a dude get deleted. Suddenly, 3 slow knocks echo on her door. His custom signal. Alessandro's voice comes through the wood, dangerously soft, ordering her to open up. She whispers no, but bro coldly replies he is not asking. He gives her 3 seconds before he kicks it down. Mentioning it was his mother's favorite door. Elena's brain shorts out. Her trembling hands unlock the deadbolt on autopilot. It is better to look the devil in the eye than wait for him to shatter the barrier. Alessandro stands in the dark hallway, looking totally unfazed. The life lesson here is that sometimes we surrender to the inevitable, just to trick ourselves into feeling like we still have a choice. Look at this guy. He shows up in a perfectly tailored suit, smelling like expensive cologne and pure, unadulterated danger. Everything about him screams untouchable mafia boss. But Elena spots the mistake right away. His hands are wiped down. Sure, but there is straight-up crimson blood stuck in his cuticles. He orders her inside, shutting her own door with this terrifying, vault-like click. He tells her to sit down before she passes out, and honestly, she is completely losing it. The room is spinning, and she crashes onto the couch, hyperventilating. Then, massive plot twist. He presses his cold hand to her neck. It is surprisingly gentle as he tells her to breathe. Extreme fear has a funny way of making us forget how to do the simplest things, like taking a breath. He stands there coaching her breathing, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Elena finally chokes out the big question, accusing him of the hit. Guys, his response is wild. He just says, yes. No denial, he drops it like they are chatting about the weather. Alessandro sits down, unbuttons his jacket, and drops the lore. Turns out this guy Franco was skimming mob cash. Elena Paul calls it murder, but Alessandro corrects her without blinking. I executed him. He says it like it is some sacred duty to punish a traitor who broke the Mafia rules. Listeners, you and I are going to unpack this together. We know we should never buy into a villain's logic. Finding excuses for a monster's dark actions is always the absolute quickest path to accepting them into your own life. Picture Elena, totally frozen, staring at this gorgeous mobster in her living room. She is desperately searching his eyes for even an ounce of guilt. Nothing. The dude is pure ice-cold calculation. She drops a heavy statement telling him flat out that he is going to take her out next. But Luca just leans forward, resting his elbows on his knees, and pins her with an intense predator gaze. He straight up tells her to delete everything from her brain. Ignorance is the only currency that buys survival in this underworld. You and I know how terrifying that realization is, right? The hardest lesson we learn in the dark is that the truth rarely sets you free. When she whispers that she cannot just forget, his voice goes dead cold. He makes it clear, forget the hit or lose his protection entirely. In a world full of wolves, she desperately needs her monster. Let me paint the absolute tension in this scene. The vibe in her apartment is completely suffocating, like that dead silence right after a gun goes off. Elena is shaking like a leaf. Alessandro drops a brutal reality check. The hitmen hunting for witnesses are savages who would make him look like a total saint. All she wanted was a normal, quiet life. But life has a funny way of making us pay a massive price for the comfort we crave. Alessandro paces to the window, looking out over the glowing Boston skyline. He tells her nobody would dare lay a finger on what belongs to the dawn. When she whispers back that she is not his property, he slowly turns around. His eyes are full of pure mafia obsession. He reminds her that she sleeps under his roof and wears his name like a bulletproof vest. Elena tries to hold her ground, arguing that needing his protection is not the same as being owned. Alessandro is not having it. He closes the gap in 3 massive strides, towering over her. She has to tilt her head back just to look him in the eyes. He calls her bluff, asking why a clever girl has not packed her bags and vanished. She tries to claim she has nowhere to go, but he coyly calls it a lie, destroying her defenses. The brutal truth is that sometimes we willingly choose the monster we know over the terrifying shadows we cannot see. He knows how every guy before him treated her like a total ghost. But this ruthless boss actually sees her. He raises his hand, his fingers hovering just a breath away from her trembling jaw. building up some absolutely insane tension without even making contact. He points out the crazy electric vibe between them, reminding her this twisted connection is what keeps her alive. Elena is internally panicking. She wants to scream, call this guy a lunatic, and sprint out the door. But our biology plays dirty tricks on us. Sometimes survival instinct completely disguises itself as desire, pulling us right toward the danger. She catches herself leaning into his warmth. She is craving the touch her brain is telling her to avoid. When she finally manages to ask what the boss actually wants, his answer is a total flex. He tells her to forget the crime scene, get some sleep, and go about her normal day. His thumb brushes her lower lip, sending a massive shiver down her spine. The long term? He is still deciding her ultimate fate, but he swears nobody will ever touch her. Listen to me, because we all have our breaking points. When Elena asked how he could possibly keep her safe, Alessandro did not even blink. He swore that anyone who dared to hurt her would die screaming. He fully admitted he was a cold-blooded monster, but a monster who protected his own. Before she could even get another word out, he kissed her. No asking, no hesitation. He tangled his hand right into her hair. Honestly, it is a strange truth in life that our strongest morals can totally vanish. She really should have pushed him away. She really should have pushed him. But heaven help her, she kissed that mob boss right back, making this soft sound that was half desperate protest and half absolute surrender. His free hand slid straight down to her waist, pulling her flush against his chest. The guy tasted like incredibly expensive whiskey and pure. Nerve in her body lit on fire. Every single nerve in her body lit on fire. For one insane, reckless moment, she totally forgot about the executions and the mob violence. You know, we are often most vulnerable precisely when we allow ourselves to forget our deepest fears. Her hands gripped his tailored jacket tightly as she let him consume her. But suddenly, Alessandro pulled back. His chest was heaving, his eyes trapped in a wild storm between raw desire and dark obsession. With a rough, strained voice, he warned her to go to bed right now, before they crossed a line, commanding her to lock that door behind him. He ordered her not to open that door for a single living soul. Stepping back, he smoothed down his suit jacket, though you could see his hands were actually shaking with a slight tremor. He paused by the exit, telling her to keep her phone close and call him the second anything felt wrong. When she gave a quiet nod, he called her a good girl, a phrase that made her feel totally owned, yet insanely secure. Then he casually dropped that they were getting dinner tomorrow at 7. When she tried to complain about her work shift, he calmly said he had already cleared it. Look, true power in this world never bothers to ask for permission. It simply rearranges reality to suit its needs. His final order was just as smooth. Wear something beautiful. The heavy door clicked shut, leaving Elena standing alone in her quiet apartment with the intoxicating taste of him still on her mouth. She threw the deadbolt and checked it twice, her legs shaking as she stumbled to the bathroom mirror. The reflection staring back was a total stranger. Her lips were swollen, her cheeks flushed with a crazy heat. It is wild how a single, intense moment can entirely rewrite the person we see in the mirror. She looked like a woman who had just been deeply, permanently claimed. Suddenly, her phone buzzed against the counter. It was a text from Alessandro, promising he was keeping watch down on the street. She texted back, asking if he was staying all night. His reply was instant. He was staying right there until she was completely safe. Logically, she should have been completely freaked out. A normal person would feel suffocated and trapped having a mob boss breathing down their neck. But here is the thing. Control, when cleverly disguised as care, can act as a highly addictive drug. Instead of terror, a dangerous warmth wrapped around her chest like a chain spun from pure silk. Too drained to change her clothes, she crashed into bed, gripping her phone like a lifeline. When she finally opened her eyes, bright morning sunlight was blasting across the floorboards. For one hazy second, she hoped the executions and that crazy kiss were just a wild fever dream. But then the rich smell of fresh coffee hit her, and she saw the steaming porcelain cup sitting quietly on her nightstand. The crushing weight of reality slammed into her chest. He had been inside her locked room while she was completely unconscious. You and I both know that kind of absolute vulnerability is terrifying. He stood close enough to hear her breathing in the dark, setting that cup down without a sound. Her hands shook violently as she reached for the expensive china. The coffee was perfect, just a splash of cream, zero sugar. Of course, he knew her exact order. The man made it his literal job to know everything. Beside the saucer was a thick card with his bold handwriting, demanding she not be late for their 7 o'clock date. A sane girl would have packed her bags and bolted out the window. But human nature is a strangely dark thing. She simply sat there in bed and drank his coffee. All right, follow me closely, because we are about to unpack some massive mafia drama. So we have Elena, right? She is staring at her tragic closet, which is basically just thrift store rags and that depressing black dress from her mom's funeral. She is literally at rock bottom. But then, bam, her phone goes off. It is the big boss. He texts her to check outside her door and explicitly says, "Do not argue." She creeps to the door like she is in a horror movie, opens it up, and boom, a pristine white box tied in this moody dark ribbon is just sitting on the mat. Her heart is practically vibrating out of her chest. Look, here is a simple truth we all have to learn. Pride is a really heavy backpack to carry when your pockets are completely empty. Sometimes you just have to open the door. Every single instinct in Elena's brain is screaming at her to leave that box alone. Accepting a massive flex like this, that is crossing a major line, and you cannot just walk that back. We always lie to ourselves about where the actual point of no return is, do we not? But her hands are shaking, and she unties the ribbon anyway. Under the tissue paper is this insanely heavy, flawless emerald green silk dress. No price tags, guys. That means this thing was custom tailored just for her body, and hidden under the dress. Killer black heels and a thick velvet box. She opens and hits the hinge, terrified of what it means, and boom, pure gold and emerald earrings. Absolutely devastating. The lesson here? Temptation never comes looking ugly. It always wears a custom-tailored suit to trick you. Those earrings are gorgeous, but they are also straight-up terrifying. Listen, a gift that huge is never just a gift. It is a loaded question, waiting for a yes or no. Her phone buzzes again. The boss says the green matches her eyes, a detail he locked onto the literal first day they met. She frantically types back, saying, "This is way too much." But his text back is slick. He says it is just silk, not a wedding ring, and dares her to wear it. The typing bubbles pop up again, warning her not to make him come upstairs. She spends the rest of the day in a massive brain fog, remembering how he kissed her like she was his literal oxygen. Here is a life lesson for you. The most dangerous traps in life are always the ones we actually want to step into. So 6 o'clock hits, and the glow-up begins. You and I are going to look at this together and watch her transform. She takes this super long, hot shower, literally washing off the dirt of her broke, tragic past. She leaves her hair wavy, just a little blush, some mascara, keeping it chill, then she puts on the emerald dress. Guys, this silk pours over her like liquid glass. It fits perfectly, showing off every curve she has been hiding. She steps into those black heels, giving her pure boss energy, and the emerald studs just catch the light. She looks in the mirror and does not even recognize herself. And honestly, the real lesson here is this. Sometimes we have to put on a beautifully crafted disguise just to finally introduce ourselves to who we really are. The girl in the mirror is polished, expensive, and powerful. A version of herself the harsh streets never let her become. True beauty is really just the surface finally catching up to the soul, right? At exactly 2 minutes to 7, boom, 3 heavy knocks at the door. She grabs her phone out of pure habit and wobbles over in her new heels. She opens the door, and there is Alessandro, looking like an absolute menace in a tailored black suit, holding one single red rose. His dark eyes go wide for a split second, a massive crack in his cold vibe. He whispers a curse, totally stunned. When she tries to blame the dress, he steps in, smelling like expensive cedar. He whispers that the silk only shows what he already knew. Lesson: the right people see your worth before you even dress up. Just picture this insane hallway tension. He hands her the rose, and Elena takes it, her fingers shaking just enough to show she is totally freaking out. When their hands brush, it is pure, chaotic electricity. You can see his jaw clench. He definitely felt it too. He points to apartment 2B. The door is wide open, pouring this super cozy light into the sketchy hallway. Guys, this is the exact same room where the nightmare murder happened. But he had it totally gutted and flipped. He tells her with zero apology that she will never know what happened there. But she knows. Yet, she still takes his arm and walks right in. Because here is a hard lesson. Sometimes saying no to a highly dangerous person feels way more fatal than stepping directly into your eyes and stepping directly into the fire. The room is literally unrecognizable. The creepy, violent Mafia vibe is gone, replaced by soft, elegant lamps and a high-end dining table set for 2. We are talking fine china, crystal glasses, the works. Stick with me here, because this is exactly where the dynamic completely flips. Elena is totally stunned and asks if he did all this today. He smoothly replies that he has people for that. Classic boss move. He pulls out her chair like an old-school gentleman, saying he wanted her comfortable. When she asks him why, it actually catches him off guard. He pours this insanely expensive French wine and says it is because she deserves nice things. The lesson is so real. We are always the most vulnerable to kindness when we have completely forgotten what it actually looks like. His voice drops low, and he tells her that every guy before him just drained her, taking her time, her energy, her hope. He says he wants to be the one to give instead. Elena stares and shoots back that he does not even know her. He hits her with this tiny, knowing smirk and says he knows enough. He raises his glass and toasts to new beginnings and forgotten endings. The vibe is so heavy, you guys. She takes a sip of this wine that probably costs more than her rent, completely aware his dark eyes are tracking her every move. Then she drops a bomb. She demands to know about his mom, bringing up the murder again. He gets mad, saying that is not dinner talk. She snaps back that kissing a tenant after a hit is not either. Lesson: the bitter truth always demands to be heard, no matter what. That accusation just hangs there, loaded and sharp as a knife. Elena instantly realizes she pushed way too far. His hand is white-knuckling his wine glass, and his jaw is ticking like crazy. But then, plot twist. The tension completely snaps, and he actually laughs. It is this warm, genuine sound that feels super weird coming from a Mafia boss. He leans back and admits she asking what's fair point, asking what she wants to know. She asks if his mom was a criminal like him. His smile instantly dies. He says no, she was a saint who married his dad blind to the mob life. By the time she realized it, Alessandro was born, and she was trapped. She tried to run, got caught, and never tried again. Here is your lesson for the day. Love and fear are very often built using the exact same bricks. He looks so haunted, completely weighed down by his past. He tells her his mom stayed just to protect him. Elena whispers she is sorry, but he shuts that down. He says his mom taught him the real survival skills: how to read a room, how to stay alive, and how to violently protect what belongs to him. Then he locks those intense eyes on her and says his mom would have loved Elena because they are both strong in ways people ignore. Before Elena can even process that emotional bomb, his right-hand man, Luca, storms in carrying dinner. Luca refuses to even look at Elena, giving off absolute hater energy. Alessandro just smoothly reveals the amazing pasta and tells her to eat. Lesson time. The absolute scariest thing about total control is how flawlessly it disguises itself as genuine care. All right, things get instantly creepy. He tells her she is too thin and casually mentions Marcus says she barely eats the groceries he sends. Elena literally freezes. She asks how the heck Marcus knows her eating habits. Alessandro just smirks like he is proud of her and piles pasta onto her plate. We are about to uncover what really went down here. Ha flat out admits he has cameras in the hallway. He claims her apartment is totally private, but he watches when she leaves, what she carries, and her trash. When she freaks out, he claims it is protection, not control, and tells her to learn the difference. They eat the rest of this amazing meal in complete silence. And guys, the lesson here is brutally obvious. A golden cage is still a cage, no matter how delicious the food is. Elena just cannot hold back anymore. She asks the ultimate question: why her? He could have any woman who understands the mob life, so why pick an outsider? Alessandro puts his fork down and just studies her. He says, "Do you really not get it?" He tells her that when she walked into that room, she looked at it like it was a palace, like a total answer to her prayers. He reaches across the table, his dangerous hands grabbing hers, and says that when he asked her name, she flinched like she expected the world to hurt her. He rubs her knuckles and says he wants to be the one guy who does not ruin her. It is crazy intense, and honestly, the life lesson is pretty profound here. The deepest, most painful human scars always manage to recognize each other from all the way across the room. Guys, we are diving right into some massive drama today. Look at this absolute madness. Alessandro straight up leans in and whispers that he wants to give Elena a literal palace, instead of stripping away what little she has left. Elena gets full body chills, clapping back that his obsession is not love, it is straight possession. But for a mob boss, those two things are the exact same vibe. He tells her he will show her the difference if she just lets him. And if she says no, he still forces his terrifying protection on her anyway, claiming he honor trapped by his compasses. She is completely trapped by his comfort. Listen, here is a real lesson for you to remember. When a seriously dangerous person builds you a golden cage, the real trap is never the heavy locks on the doors. It is the undeniable comfort you find inside. Let us look at this piece by piece, shall we? Their din-up story is this wild, tense dance. They swap stories about her lonely childhood while totally dodging the fact that he ends people for a living. Plot twist: they both obsess over the exact same tragic books. He turns on the Max charm, dropping dark jokes and reading her mind. Elena is low-key terrified because falling for this Mafia kingpin would be way too easy. By 9 o'clock, he walks her to her door, his massive frame taking up all the air in the hallway. She nervously thanks him for dinner, and this dude just softly thanks her for not running away. He leans in close, and instead of kissing her lips, drops a soft kiss on her forehead like stamping a dangerous contract. Never forget this life lesson. We almost always fall for the real devil when he shows up acting like a perfect, polite gentleman. Just as he tells her to sleep well, boom, the entire foundation of the building violently shakes. A massive explosion goes off downstairs, rattling the literal windows. Before Elena even processes the shock, Alessandro goes full beast mode. He slams her against the wall, using his giant body as a human shield, and suddenly he has a massive gun in his hand. Where was he even hiding that? Then Luca bursts up the stairs, his crisp shirt soaked in dark blood, yelling that the rival Antonelli Mafia has found them. You guys, the charming dinner date is officially over. Alessandro's face turns to pure ice as he asks how many guys are coming. It goes to show you a powerful life lesson. When true chaos finally strikes, all the fake masks drop away, and you finally get to see exactly who a person truly is deep down. Luca is gasping, saying there are at least 8 hitmen. They already took down 2 guards. Alessandro does not even flinch. Suddenly, another massive explosion absolutely rocks the hallway, killing all the lights. It is pitch black, and Alessandro crushes Elena to his chest. Guys, she can feel his heart literally hammering. This stone-cold boss is actually terrified of losing her. He whispers harshly, telling her to follow his exact orders with zero hesitation because her life is on the line. She is too scared to even speak, just nodding. He grabs her hand and announces they are heading for the roof so Luca can get her out safely. It is a crazy tense moment that teaches us a super important life lesson. True survival is not about staying and trying to fight every single battle that comes your way. Real strength is knowing exactly when it is time to turn and run. Elena is full-on panicking, asking what he is going to do. Alessandro goes completely cold and says he is staying. It is his turf, and he never runs. He shoves her toward Luca. But wait! Before she gets dragged off, the Don grabs her back for one insanely desperate kiss. Forget the sweet forehead peck. This is a heavy, tragic goodbye kiss. He looks at her with absolute agony and drops the biggest bomb yet. He tells her if he dies tonight, his entire empire, the money, the building, it is all completely hers. She is sobbing, begging him not to do it, but he just fades into the dark, ordering her not to look back. Luca grabs her like a literal vice and pulls her up the stairs. The drama is absolutely peaking right here. It is a brutal reminder of a deeply sad life lesson. Sometimes the most tragic form of love a broken man can ever give you is his own total sacrifice. Gunshots are popping off in the stairwell like crazy thunder. Luca is stressed, hissing at Elena to ditch her fancy heels immediately. She kicks them off, sprinting barefoot on the freezing concrete. Down below, it is absolute carnage. We hear Alessandro yelling mob orders in rapid Italian, and then a brutal scream gets cut off entirely. Elena is breathless, crying that the boss is going to die. But Luca gives her an ice-cold reality check. He says the boss will wipe out every single one of them, but only if he is not distracted by worrying about her. They finally smash through the roof door into the freezing night, looking over the gorgeous Boston skyline. Stick with me, because this scene hits hard with a major life lesson. It shows how the massive world around us stays completely blind to the terrifying private tragedies happening right in the shadows. Luca gives her zero time to chill. He drags her across the gravel roof right to the edge. There is another building next door, separated by a terrifying 4-foot gap of empty air. Elena is freaking out, digging her bare feet in, refusing to jump. But Luca grabs her shoulders, forcing intense eye contact. He lays out the facts, reminding her that Alessandro is the most lethal dude in Boston. He has survived literal wars and betrayals. Luca swears those hitmen downstairs are already walking corpses. But if Elena stays and gets hurt, it will break the boss's focus and get him clipped. This intensity brings up such a harsh life lesson for all of us, Kat. Sometimes our desperate emotional need to stick around and help is the exact distraction that ends up getting the people we love destroyed. He just screams at her to jump. Elena is full on sobbing, the icy wind biting her face. She cries out that she cannot let Alessandro die down there. Luca ignores her panic, marching right to the edge to test the gap. He barks at her to jump and tells her to never look down. Guys, the tension is unreal. Luca hits a full sprint and launches himself across the gap like a total action hero, landing perfectly on the other side. He spins around and yells at her to move, but Elena is frozen, staring back at the roof door. She is seriously debating running into a literal death trap just to be with the mob boss. Luca totally reads her mind, screaming that if she goes back, she forces Alessandro to sacrifice himself. It leaves us with a really solid life lesson. Sometimes, the absolute bravest thing any of us can ever do is simply close our eyes and take a massive leap into the unknown. Luca's voice rips through the freezing wind. He yells that she will just distract the boss long enough for a rival hitman to clip him. He asks if she really wants to be the actual reason the Dawn dies. Those words hit her like a ton of bricks. We have to pause and realize a deep life lesson here. Heavy guilt is always a way stronger anchor than simple fear. That guilt forces Elena to back up. She hits a dead sprint and just flies. For a crazy second, she is literally hovering over a massive drop. She slams into the gravel, and Luca catches her, muttering praise that sounds weird coming from the sidekick instead of the boss. He points to the fire escape, and they rush down the rusty stairs while her bare feet get totally shredded. 4 floors, 3, 2. Suddenly, the entire brownstone above them erupts into a violent nightmare of massive explosions. Gunfire echoes everywhere, mixed with shattering glass, and a scream that gets brutally cut off. Elena forces herself not to turn around, trying to block out the horrible thought of Alessandro getting wiped out. They hit the wet alley, gasping in the smell of gross garbage and cold rain. Luca is aggressively texting, and in 30 seconds flat, a stealthy black getaway car pulls up. Luca barks orders, telling the driver to lock her down at the safe house. This brings us to a really tough life lesson. Blind love will make you do incredibly reckless things, but true loyalty always demands strict discipline. Luca looks at Elena, and this hardened mob guy actually softens up. He swears on his life that the boss will come for her once the war zone settles, but Elena completely breaks down, asking the ultimate terrifying question. What if he does not make it out alive? Luca does not even flinch. He promises that he will. He squeezes her shoulder, saying he has known the boss since they were kids, and the Dawn has never looked at anyone the way he looks at her. He swears Alessandro would burn down heaven and hell to get back to her. You and I are going to look at this together and realize a massively important life lesson. True devotion is never just spoken out loud. It is proven when you are walking straight through the fire. With that mic drop, Luca turns and actually sprints right back into the screaming gunfight, diving headfirst into the madness. Elena climbs into the car, freezing and barefoot in that stunning green dress Alessandro bought her. As they speed off, she watches the building fade, seeing absolutely nothing but the terrifying strobe lights of mobster gunfire going off in the top windows. Somewhere in that building, Alessandro is fighting for his life to protect her. Elena is locked in a Cambridge safe house, and the place is totally sterile. The driver sweeps every room, then posts up by the door with a weapon. Zero comfort. In this brutal Mafia world, silence is often the only honest companion we ever get. Elena paces the freezing floors, her emerald dress looking like a tragic costume against the bleak furniture. The minutes stretch into pure agony. She grips his phone, begging it to vibrate, praying for a sign that the dangerous man she loves is still alive. 1 hour bleeds into the next. 2 hours. 3, the dead silence is deafening. Finally, at exactly 1:47 in the morning, The heavy air in the room completely shifts. The phone suddenly shatters the quiet. Elena answers before the first ring even finishes, her hands shaking. Hearing Alessandro's exhausted voice makes her completely fall apart. She frantically asks if he took a hit. He brushes it off, claiming minor injuries, then states with chilling calm that the threat is neutralized, all of them. There is a deep tragedy in hearing the person you love speak of, taking out a hit squad like a casual business transaction. He orders her to stay hidden until morning, but she can barely breathe. She weeps into the receiver, telling him she cannot stay in that room alone. She desperately needs to see his face, to know he is really breathing, and to stop the agonizing feeling that her heart was just ripped straight out of her chest. Alessandro's voice drops into a dangerously low whisper, asking what she truly wants. She begs him to be safe by her side. A heavy silence follows, filled entirely by his ragged breathing. He swears he will arrive by dawn and tells her to sleep. But sleep is a luxury only the peaceful get to enjoy, and her mind is an absolute war zone. He tells her to wait, and the line goes dead. Elena stands frozen, staring at the phone. The driver offers water she ignores, and food she cannot stomach. She curls up under a forgotten blanket, watching the windows shift from pitch black to a bruised gray, and finally to pale blue. Time is honestly the cruelest master when you are waiting in the dark. At 6:23, a sudden noise completely shatters the terrible stillness. A sharp knock echoes. The guard checks the peephole and steps aside. Alessandro walks in, literally looking like he crawled out of a nightmare. His suit is shredded and soaked in blood. A nasty gash rests over his eye, and dark bruises paint his jaw. His knuckles are split open and raw. He favors his left side with every step, but he is breathing. Stick with me here, because this is where everything changes. When the armor falls, only the bare truth remains. Elena stands in a daze, letting the blanket drop. They stare at each other across the room. He looks like the Grim Reaper himself, and she stands frozen in her ruined emerald dress. Recognizing the heavy weight of the moment, the driver quietly slips out the door, leaving these two bruised souls entirely alone. 8 men, Alessandro whispers. A rival family sent an elite death squad to take his life and steal his empire. He asks if she knows their fatal mistake. Elena shakes her head, unable to speak. They assumed having something to lose made him weak. He steps forward slowly, dragging his battered body across the floor. They were right about his vulnerability, but they completely misunderstood the mind of a desperate man. Finding someone to love does not make a dangerous man softer. It just gives him a reason to truly bare his teeth. He finally had something worth killing for. He stops mere inches from her face. He confesses that when those assassins breached to his walls and he realized they might touch her to get to his throne, his life's true purpose became terrifyingly clear. Alessandro lifts his bloodied hand, cupping her cheek with bruised knuckles. He tells her straight up he wants absolutely everything. Her mornings, her nights, her fears, and her trust. He demands her completely. When she whispers his name, his thumb brushes her skin with impossible gentleness. He freely admits he is not a good man. He has committed atrocities and promises to do far worse, just to keep her breathing. We all look for knights in shining armor, but sometimes the only one who can save you from the wolves is a darker wolf. He could never offer a normal life, but he gives her absolute protection. A world where she will never be invisible again. As tears wash down her face, she chokes out that his promise just sounds like another beautiful, gilded cage. He presses his forehead against hers, his breath ghosting over her lips. "No," he murmurs, "it is a fortress, and she would be its queen, not its captive." He lays out his terms. If she wants to work, she can. If she wants school, he will pay. The only absolute rule is her safety. A true partner does not clip your wings. They build a sky where nothing can ever shoot you down. Elena asks what would happen if she walked away. Alessandro confesses it would completely destroy him, but she would still keep her freedom and his protection. Her safety is unconditionally guaranteed. He pulls back just an inch, his dark, exhausted eyes searching her soul. With a rough catch in his throat, he admits his final, desperate truth. He was just hoping she would choose to love the monster anyway. Elena stares into the eyes of this beautifully dangerous man. He just slaughtered an entire hit squad for her, offered her a kingdom, and kept his promises. Every logical nerve in her body screams to run, to take the safe apartment, and stay far from the bloodshed trailing him like a shadow. You and I know that the brain and the heart rarely agree on survival. Her treacherous heart is begging to stay. She softly asks about the men who attacked. Are there more out there? More families plotting to strike her just to wound him? Alessandro refuses to lie or soften the blow. He tells her there are always enemies lurking in the shadows. He can minimize the chaos, but he can never entirely erase the crosshairs painted on his back. That is the brutal reality of loving a king. She asks the final, heaviest question. If she chooses him, what happens next? His hand tightens against her skin. He vows she will become untouchable. Anyone who dares cross her path will suffer a fate worse than the grave. They will face him. He promises she will wear his ring, carry his dangerous name, and be woven into the fabric of his entire empire. She would be sacred. Elena's breath hitches at the mention of a ring. Alessandro instantly softens, promising it will only happen when she is truly ready. When she realizes this is not just some dark obsession. Sometimes, broken people do not know how to speak of romance. He struggles to find the words, admitting that his fierce, violent devotion is the absolute closest thing to love a shattered man could ever offer. The tension is heavy, but right here in this shadowed room, Kara does the absolute unthinkable. She reaches up, her small hand covering Alessandro's. His knuckles are completely bruised, torn from the brutal violence he just committed in her name. Anyone else would have run away from the blood. But she turns her head and kisses his ruined palm. Alessandro's breath hitches. Suddenly, his mouth is on hers, desperate, tasting of iron and the promises he would kill to keep. She pulls him closer by his torn shirt, ignoring his wince of pain. When he asks if this is a yes, she whispers that she will try. Try to trust him. Try to build something right in the center of hell. Sometimes, real love is not found in the light, but fiercely forged in the dark. He kisses her again, the wild desperation fading into something soft. That is enough, he tells her, promising they will figure out the rest together. When he pulls back, Kara notices the fresh blood weeping through the fabric at his ribs. She tells him he needs a doctor, but his reply is raw. He just needs sleep, and he needs her in that exact order, in that exact. Looking toward the bedroom, he asks if she will lie next to him. He needs to know she is real, that he did not lose her to the violent night. Careful of his split skin, she guides him into the room. Watching him strip off that ruined suit is a lesson in heartbreak. Every bruise is a violent story written across his skin. We forget how vulnerable the dangerous ones really are, until they take off their heavy armor for love. Let's stay right here for a second. They lay together on top of the covers. He is stripped down while Kara remains in that emerald dress because the effort of changing feels like too much to bear after a night of chaos. Alessandro pulls her flush against his chest, burying his weary face in her hair. Half asleep, he murmurs his gratitude. Thank you for not running, for choosing to try. She laces her delicate fingers through his damaged ones as he thanks her for coming back. His rough voice fades as exhaustion takes him, promising he will always keep her safe. His grip loosens but never lets go. Kara lays awake, watching dawn paint the ceiling gold, listening to his heartbeat. It is a quiet truth of life that sometimes the most profound peace comes right after the worst storms. Listen up, because this is absolute insanity. The sun comes up and Kara is finally waking up to her unhinged reality. This is no fairy tale, okay? She is staring down a lifetime of dangerous days, constant threats, and wondering if her man is even coming home. But here is the massive plot twist. She gets his absolute terrifying devotion. This guy is a literal monster. But the beautiful tragedy, he is her monster now. She just wanted a cheap apartment and walked straight into a Mafia boss's lair. 3 months later, she is waking up in his Beacon Hill penthouse, and this ruthless kingpin is staring at her like she hung the moon. The very places that should make us run for our lives sometimes become the only true sanctuary we ever find. She stretches out, completely casual, tossing out a simple good morning. And boomed a massive emerald ring on left hand. He slipped a massive emerald ring on her finger 2 weeks ago. It is not an official proposal yet, just an intense, silent promise waiting for her to realize she is not his hostage. Then, acting like an impatient kid, Alessandro drags her out of bed and into his office. Usually, this room is filled with the proof of his criminal empire. But today, the heavy desk is shoved out of the way. Sitting right there is an easel with a framed piece of paper. It is the deed to the entire building at 247 Beacon Hill, signed directly over to her. Listen, real love does not deal in empty words. When you actually care for someone, you give them the literal ground they stand on. Kara instantly pushes back, telling him she cannot accept a whole building. But Alessandro shuts that down immediately. He wraps his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. He explains this is her ultimate safety net. If his enemies ever show up and his empire crumbles, this is her pure escape route. She spins around, swearing she is not going anywhere. This terrifying mob boss flashes a genuine smile, looking almost innocent. He needs her to have the absolute power to walk away. Just to know she stays. Because she wants to. Not because she is trapped. She jokes that it is just a prettier cage. But you and I both know the real truth here. Love simply cannot exist if you do not have a choice. It only means something if it is given completely free. He kisses her face, promising her this is not a cage. He is giving her wings. And whether she flies away or stays is entirely her call. Kara stares at that deed, seeing her total independence in permanent black ink. Then she looks up at this heavily scarred, violent man who has literally taken lives just to keep her safe. He taught her the massive difference between owning someone and fiercely protecting them. Right then, she drops the bombshell. She tells him she is staying because she is wildly in love with him. Alessandro is shocked. This is the first time she has actually said the words out loud. His version of romance is dark and twisted, sure, but she does not care. Real love is all about embracing the absolute ugliest flaws and choosing them anyway. She tells this ruthless boss that he is enough exactly the way he is. Alessandro pulls her into a bone-crushing hug, filled with unshed tears and raw emotion. Resting his forehead against hers, he admits he is terrible with words, but makes a blood vow right there. There is no line he will not cross, no brutal price he will not happily pay to keep her safe. If that is not true love, he literally does not know what is. Kara smiles, calling it a terrifying, dangerous kind of love, but love all the same. Alessandro lets out this rare, broken laugh. Only this woman could make captivity feel like absolute freedom. The biggest takeaway here is clear, disenfranchising. Sometimes the things the rest of the world calls totally broken are actually perfectly whole for us. Looking back, Kara thinks about the desperate, invisible girl she was just 3 months ago. That terrified girl would never recognize the confident woman standing here today. But that old version of her had never been truly seen, let alone guarded with such insane, all-consuming devotion. She went looking for a basic apartment and found a true home in the darkest shadows of the underworld. She found impossible freedom with a man who had the power to lock her up, but literally handed her the keys instead. Sure, this freedom comes heavily armed with security cameras and bodyguards, but it is a choice she is happily making. We all know the truth. Sometimes the absolute safest place on earth is right in the dead center of a hurricane. Some cages are just worth living in. Alessandro buries his face in her neck, begging her to come right back to bed. He whispers that the outside world can wait a few more hours. But Kara grabs his scarred hand, telling him the world could wait forever as long as she has him. He pulls her in tight, swearing on his life she will have him for as long as she wants him, fully, eternally, standing there, wrapped up in the arms of her gorgeous monster. Everything just clicks into place. She is perfectly safe despite the massive target on his back, and totally free despite the heavy security. It is a wild thing when you realize you can belong completely to someone else, yet still be entirely yourself. We all chase independence. But the absolute truest freedom is finding that one person who completely anchors your soul. That crazy expensive apartment was just the warm-up act for their story. Kara realizes her actual home was never going to be made of brick and glass anyway. Her real home is the absolute, unquestionable security of his arms. It is the shielding weight of his incredibly dark and dangerous brand of love. She knows exactly what the risks are now. She knows the brutal violence that shadows his every single move. But she is ready to wake up and choose this chaotic life and this terrifyingly beautiful man. Every single day, forever. So as we wrap up this insane recap, let's keep one major life lesson in mind. Real love does not always show up wrapped in a neat little bow. Sometimes it arrives bruised, bleeding, and covered in scars. But if it stands between you and a cold world, you grab onto it and you never let it go.